Well, I just want to say a very few things about the organization of our faculty in the early years and what happened when Larry came. So the Department of Genetics at the UW was set up in 1959 with Herschel, Roman, Dave Stadler, and Herschel's graduate student, Don Hawthorne, as the regular members of the department. And then Arno Matulski, who's gone now, and myself were joint members for medicine, as was Howard Douglas, also for microbiology. So that was the organization of the department in 1959. And then in 1961, Larry Sandler came out to teach the basic course in genetics, and he came out from Wisconsin, and he was very popular. And then the following year, he came out again. I don't know what the details were, but he came out again in 1961, and he then remained here as a permanent member of the department. When we first got our building, our first building in 1965, which is the one, it's not this one, but the one that no longer exists as such. So Larry and I had adjoining labs. I was one side and I was the other. And when I would come in to work, he was always sitting there. I usually came in after him, and his door was open. And if he didn't have someone with him, I would always sit and chat with him about all kinds of things. He was interested in everything, even besides the fruit fly. And we would talk about the economy. We would talk about World War II, which you just heard I was in, but he wasn't. And he was interested in everything under the sun, and he was always willing to talk with people. It was a great thing. One of the and I now remember that one of his students was Dan Lindsley. Dan Lindsley was not a student, but a colleague of his. But Dan Lindsley's son was a graduate student in Larry's lab, and he took a master's degree and remained working with Ben Hall for the rest of his career. But then I remember one of the main interests of Larry and Dan Lindsley was they planned a joint sabbatical in Rome. And they were going to set up some Drosophila populations, and the first thing that Larry did was to start studying Italian, and it wasn't long before he was fluent in Italian, and I was amazed that he was so good, and I think his wife was fluent also. And when they got to Rome, they decided how they were going to set up this fruit fly population, and they would go out to the marketplaces, and Dan Lindsley would do the trapping of the flies, and Larry would sort of stay in the background and explain to people what his colleague was doing. and And Larry could be very, very effective at that. And I don't know whether Dan understood much Italian, but it didn't make much difference anyways. And, but anyway, they were all sorts of wonderful stories. But Larry was a very funny person. He was so clever that people enjoyed just getting him to reminisce and tell all kinds of stories. And Dave Stadler wrote a fair amount about him, and he thinks that Larry was outstanding, both in classroom teaching, formal classes, and as a teacher of graduate students. And you just heard, of course, a little while ago from one of his former students how effective he was. And it was rather puzzling that when Larry first came out, the first time he taught the summer course, he sort of told us that he didn't think he should take any graduate students to work with. And at that time, there were so few people going into Drosophila that it looked like there was not going to be any employment for that. Well, he was persuaded quite differently by the graduate students themselves, and the students were unanimous in this feeling about Larry as an outstanding teacher. And I think we've always felt that, and it's something that I'm sure was bound to happen. So those are the few remarks I remember most about Larry, and I can tell you from his wonderful talk that he gave this morning that you can see how effective Larry was as a teacher. So thank you very much.